All right, I have a question for you. How many of you are familiar with a couple named Priscilla and Aquila? Anybody know that couple? All right, well, I'm going to give you a quiz to see if you can guess which one it is, all right? Maybe it is a country and music duo, husband and wife, Priscilla and Aquila. Okay, maybe it is a husband and wife house flipping television show starring Priscilla and Aquila. Maybe it's a couple with a cooking TV show. Or maybe it's a husband and wife who are circus performers, Priscilla and Aquila. The correct answer is that they were close friends of the Apostle Paul. You read about them in the book of Acts. They lived in the city of Corinth, where Paul went and kind of developed a partnership between them and Paul. They made their living as tent makers, and Paul also, as he traveled, he made his living as a tent maker, and so they had this in common. They were very strong, committed Christians. Paul was also. In fact, the church in Corinth, the early church, met in the home of Priscilla and Aquila. They were not in ministry full-time, but like Paul was, but they took their faith very seriously and strove to make an impact on the lives of people around them for the kingdom of God. Well, I'm glad you're here today for the final week of our Not Me series. The first 5 weeks of this series, we heard stories from Donna Lee, from Brent Smith, Addie McIntyre, Lori Fogarty, and then last Sunday from Daniel Sweet. And like all of them, sooner or later, all of us, including you, are going to have an experience where you say, I never thought something like this could ever happen to me. And hopefully part of what we've learned from this is that no matter what we go through, you know, that God can help. God can help us to get through anything that life throws at you. And you can come out on the other side eventually happier, you know, stronger, better in many ways, and that you can make it. Well, today you're going to hear from a couple who, like Priscilla and Aquila, have taken on the challenge to try to live out their faith very seriously for a very many, many years, and to try to make an impact on the lives of other people. And they're going to share 2 stories with you. One, and I never thought something this terrible could ever happen to us. And then a second, I never thought something this amazing could happen to us. So please welcome David again and his wife Ellen Stackable. Guys, come on up. You guys can sit in the comfortable chairs. I'll be the greatest in the kingdom and sit on this hard stool. Just my cross to bear, I guess. Well, thanks for doing this, you guys. I asked them several months ago about doing this, and they had a lot going on, which you're going to hear about. But so why don't we start off with you guys just telling us where each of you grew up, and then how you met and got married.
Well, I grew up in Denver, Colorado. Moved here to go to school and be part of a campus ministry, and that's where I met David.
Move here
in Stillwater.
Oh, in Stillwater. Okay.
Sorry.
That is not. Yeah. We have two OSU fans in the crowd. We have 2. They're both right back there.
Now, this is a whole other story. If any of you guys were ever involved in kind of a wacko group of some kind, that's a whole other story. But Ellen was involved in a group that got way off track, and anyway, that's a whole other story. But she escaped that in a way and came to Stillwater, and I was involved in a Christian ministry there, and that's how we met. So I took her from Colorado and came to Oklahoma. So basically, she was involved in that, I was involved in that, and we were total strangers. We were 26, I think, when we met. So I knew fairly soon that she was for me, and vice versa. One of the things where the Lord just made that clear, and so yeah.
So you guys have been married how many years now?
A lot.
I'll let you answer that.
30-some. We don't keep track.
I think it's
so weird, but
you're supposed to know that.
Well,
I think it's 35.
35. Yeah.
There we go.
And you guys now, you live in Tulsa. You have a family. We have a picture of your family up here with. We got Gwen is the youngest, right?
Yes.
And then Adam in the middle. And then Will is the oldest in the white T-shirt there, and they live in Oklahoma City. And These guys actually have a couple of grandkids.
Yes, 2 grand boys. Yes.
I'm hoping we don't have any for like a decade at least. But anyway, so you guys are going along and you're doing your lives and things are going, pretty well. All the regular ups and downs of life. And then about 10 years ago, you were telling me that you guys went to Florida on a vacation to Amelia Island. Is that how you say it? And your folks had a place down there or something. And then out of nowhere, something really difficult happened. Why don't you tell us what it was?
So her parents used to live in Florida, and on one particular Christmas holiday, we decided to go be with them during that time. So, Christmas season, very pleasant time. You're with family. It's always, it's usually really good. So we like to ride bikes, and so the two of us decided to kind of break away for a little bit and take her parents' 2 bicycles and go just mess around. We went to this fort and just had a blast. We were heading back, and we were going fast. When you're on bikes, there's times you can go fast, and so we were booking it. And so then where things went bad really fast, I was in front. We had no helmets on. I was just zooming along. Well, a pickup truck came zooming past me, and I'm not sure if he was just, one of these drivers that don't like bicycle people. But he laid on the horn, and that startled me. And then at the same time, my hat, I had one of my favorite hats, a baseball hat, flew off. So I just instinctively, without thinking, I turned my head to see where my hat had gone. Because, I'm thinking, I got to retrieve that. And I don't know 100%, but I think what must have happened when I did that, I turned my bike slightly to the left, as I was looking back. What I did not realize is, before she was quite a bit behind me, but then I realized too late that she was right behind me. So when I turned, all of a sudden, in an instant, she crashed into me. And it was a horrible, we went from happy, we're heading back to home to see our kids, and her parents are there, and then all of a sudden, there's this horrible crash and impact. Ellen flies off and hits her head on the pavement. And as soon as she did that, it was a nightmare, because blood was coming out of her nose and ears. She was starting to kind of get quickly unconscious and kind of incoherent. So you can imagine me, here I am, all of a sudden you have to deal with this. And I was trying to help her. Then I just started screaming. Help me, because I knew I can't help her. I've got to get someone here in a hurry. Had no cell phones. So I just started screaming to the top of my lungs, help me. And some people started coming fairly quickly. Some people heard us. And whoever came must have called, the ambulance fairly quickly. But then in the meantime, I'm still trying to help her. Her parent, or your dad, shows up. I don't know how, but yeah, that's right. I forgot. You don't remember. So her dad shows up about the same time that the IMSA people showed up. So he's trying to, deal with all this. So long story short, they put her on a they rushed her to a place where there was a helicopter, put her on a helicopter, and took her immediately to Jacksonville, Florida. Anybody ever been to Jacksonville? So it's a fairly large city, and fortunately there's a hospital there that's what's called a teaching hospital. So they bring med students and things there to learn from older doctors, and so here she is. She's taken away from me, she's on a helicopter. I have no clue if she's going to make it or not. And so at this point, it's gone from Christmas, holidays, to my wife is on a helicopter with a horrible head injury. And then we had to drive, so all the family piles in the family car, and we have to drive from there to Jacksonville. Of course, she's already getting there fairly quickly on the helicopter. So that drive was really tough, because I'm thinking all the things of, can't believe this happened. This would never happen to me. Kind of thinking already in terms of it's my fault, all that kind of stuff. And Ellen's the love of my life, so here she is, gone and severely injured. So they get her to the hospital. She makes it. So what happened at the hospital, there was a lady, an amazing surgeon, who was there operating on somebody else. She was a brain surgeon. So she goes from that operating theater right into where Ellen was being brought. So what happened is Ellen had a brain hemorrhage, so she was bleeding, on the inside. and that had, you had to stop that in a hurry. You're going to have major issues. So the operation was successful. At the hospital, when she came through surgery, but you can imagine how horrible she looked, all the completely bound up with bandages and everything's swollen up. And so then there was this waiting period for days where I didn't, no one knew. The doctors would say, her brain is swollen up. And they have that device that, allows things to drain and all that, where you don't want, that has to happen. And so it was a waiting game. Ellen's an educator, and so I'd asked the doctor, is she going to be able to teach again? You start to think cognitively what she going to be like when she comes out of there. And for a while, they didn't know, because when the brain swells up, it's a question of how much damage has been done. You want to finish the story real quick?
Well, we were talking about it last night, and Ellen said she had to relieve the pressure on her brain. They cut a sort of a Nike swoosh size thing in the side of her skull, so that the brain would have room and whatever. But we were talking about, you came out and really considering very little permanent long-term damage. Said you could maybe sometimes have a hard time hearing a little bit, or give her the mic and she explain.
The first thing I remember was David standing over me, and I woke up and he was there, and I was just so glad. I don't have any remembrance of the accident at all. I did have kind of a residual PTSD. Whenever I heard a helicopter go over our house, I would just freak out, and I think it's because I had a helicopter ride. And then I went back to teaching fairly quickly within about 8 weeks, and it was tough. I had severe headaches, some vertigo, and I would forget words and had to build new pathways. But really the only long-term is just a little hearing loss here. So, and I had a lot of time at home where I just, Psalm 23 really came alive to me, the valley of the shadow of death. And I think for me the end of it was that my whole life, even as a believer, I sort of had this fear of death, and it left after that. I no longer fear death. And it was because I came so close to it, I think.
Sometimes people, when bad things happen, even believers, they get mad at God, they get angry at God, or sometimes they draw a lot closer to God. How did it have any kind of different impact on you guys going through, that you felt different during that time than you felt before or after, as far as spiritually?
One of the things, whenever you've had a loss, let's say you lose your puppy and you think the puppy's gone, but you find the puppy, oh my gosh, we found. There's this emotional, like you're trying to cope with the loss, and then it's not. So for me, when the doctors were in there in the room, and when she finally came awake, one of the staff said, "Who was that?" pointing to me, and Ellen goes, "That's my husband." And as soon as she said that, it's like, yes, she's still with us, and of course that was a sign for the doctors that things are healing. And this was the fun part of the story. I went from being the distraught husband, is she going to make it or not? When that happened and the doctor said she's going to be okay, I got on the elevator, and in the elevator myself, I was just kind of yelling inside the elevator, just exulting, and then out in the parking lot, just kind of exulting that. So for me, one of the things was just an appreciation in a deeper way. If you've lost something and you do and you do get it back, there's so many songs and verses that have been written about. We don't know what you've lost until you don't know what you have until you lose it, sort of thing. So that was one of the things for me.
Well, I think all of the above, Russ, that, there were times when I was angry, times when I was confused, and but I think God is bigger than that. And I think for, me, I felt a freedom to be honest with him, about my anger and confusion, and then also being able to see him in the middle of it all, at the very end of it. But it was a tough time. I couldn't go up and down the stairs at school without help. And so my son was actually at the high school where I taught, and he would come in between classes and help me go up and down stairs because I had so much vertigo. And so, I'm a very self-sufficient independent person, it was hard to be in a place of dependency, but I think good ultimately.
Well, then more recently, you guys had a very different situation, especially Ellen, and kind of another, I never thought something like this could happen to me. But before we get to really what happened just in last December, tell us about this thing that you got started in going to visit prisons.
Well, 5 years ago, I was in the middle of trying to figure out what to do for my master's at OU. Good, yay, OU. All three of our kids went to OU, by the way. And I went down one of those rabbit trails of research, and it was about incarcerated women in Oklahoma. And I started looking at Dr. Susan Sharp's, who's a professor at OU. She had done extensive just research and looking at their stories. And I just thought somebody needs to do something. And for me, writing has always been so powerful and really tied into just the heart of God, I think. In the beginning was the Word, you know, and God created the world with words, with singing. And so I started trying to find a way in to do some kind of writing program, and ended up through a friend, this woman who does spoken word poetry in Tulsa, and I got into the Tulsa jail and started doing what I call now restorative and therapeutic writing. And that was 5 years ago, and we now have 35 volunteers, 9 classes a week in every prison in Oklahoma, and we're also at a rehab center in Tijuana, Mexico. So over those 5 years, over 2,000 women have taken our classes in prison, and it's been amazing. It is just amazing to treat people who are forgotten and thrown away by society and who've always been at the very bottom of the heap. When you treat them as people of worth, it's transformative.
We have a little video that I want to show you, and then I want to tell you what happened next. But let's show the video, Tina, and then we'll talk about the really incredible thing that came out of this.
Oklahoma incarcerates more women than anywhere else in the country, and they have for the last 20 years. There's no coincidence that prisons are often in out-of-the-way rural places. It's because we don't want to see them. We don't want to know what's happening. Many of the women that are incarcerated have been victims of some kind of abuse, or they were homeless, or then they started doing drugs. And so all these things come together, and I think, I see why you ended up in prison.
Okay, guys, should we start? So we're going to be writing about a time when you felt a sense of victory. And we're going to take about 10 to 15 minutes to write.
We provide a safe place for them to overcome trauma and pain. We provide a way for them to find their voices. So it is so much more than just writing. It becomes a therapeutic way for healing to occur.
Learning to change my life of abuse to a life of glory. Victoria says that I am a woman who has learned to change from who I was taught to be to a woman who I'm proud to be.
I was told before prison I was stupid.
When somebody unlocks a door in their heart and is willing to share it with you, that is a precious thing. Their only true freedom they have to hold within themselves. And so writing becomes really infinitely more powerful for them.
I have a voice. I have a voice. I have hope. I have hope. I have the power to change. I have the power to change.
Hope is so important to me because for a lot of my life I didn't have any. So to have hope now, in this of all places, is the most amazing thing. Hope.
You know, we were talking last night when we had dinner about that Oklahoma, you know, has more women in prison and sentences more women to prison than any other place on planet Earth. And just a couple of things I was unaware of. They were talking about a particular situation where there was a woman who had a child, infant or a little small child, and she ran to the grocery store or something, and was it her boyfriend or was there? When she came home, the child's leg had been broken. So she took the baby to the hospital and got it repaired. And tell them I don't know what happened as far as the sentencing and whatever.
So she got charged with failure to protect, which in Oklahoma is considered a violent crime, which means you have to serve 85% of your sentence. She got 20 years, and her boyfriend got 10 months. And by the time she was put in prison, her boyfriend was released. So she relinquished parental rights of her baby to a cousin because she didn't want the abusive boyfriend to ever touch the child again. And he had already tried to choke her before that, but she felt she was afraid. She didn't know where to go. And she did everything she knew was right to do. And so she is still in prison now, one of the most optimistic women I've ever met, you know, who loves Jesus with all her heart. And but she keeps getting denied release over and over again. So she actually did the beauty school at Mabel Bassett, and I went to her graduation, and her kids came. And it's the first time she'd seen them in 8 years. And it was overwhelming.
Well, it's things like that. You can see the injustice of that pretty easily, that, you know, because she had left her baby with this guy, he gets out of prison in 8 months, and she's sentenced to 20 years. And there's a lot of legislation in our state that is very punitive toward females, and that's why there's such a disproportional number of females, and they're trying to get these kinds of things changed, but there's just a lot of district attorneys and legislators who just they don't want it to change, and they like the system as it is, and know it's very, very unfair to women in our state. But then something happened last year, is that Ellen found out that she had been nominated from around the world. CNN does a thing every year where they get 10 heroes from around the world, people who are doing extraordinary things, like regular, everyday people that are doing unbelievable things to help other people and to have an impact. And she found out she was named one of the 10 people from around the world. And her ministry, or it's not really a ministry, but her program is called Poetic Justice, because she uses poetry in her kind of therapy, but it's obviously in prisons. And so they were invited in December to go to New York City for a live television show on CNN. We have a couple of pictures here. Here's one of them at the actual program. And then here's these two guys, and then here's Ellen with Gordon Anderson, is that? Anderson Cooper. I mean, yeah, and then there's Will Ferrell was at it, Lenny Kravitz, Bryan Cranston, and other, you know, famous actors and people. And this is when they were showing some of the video that we just showed, and this person introduced her. I mean, that just had to have been an incredible experience to go from doing this stuff just in not complete obscurity, right, but I mean, nobody knew, not that many people knew what you were doing and the impact it was making, but somehow somebody found out, and you wind up as one of the top 10 heroes in the world for CNN in 2018, and you guys go and they give you this big award. What was that like for you guys?
I just thought I forgot to bring the award. Oh, well. Well, they gave me this big old piece of wood, which Russ had asked me to bring. It was unreal, honestly. It was just, but the nice part was the other 9 heroes felt the same way I did. They're just really ordinary people, super nice people, and we were all just kind of like, can't believe this is happening to me. And for me, at the core of what we've always done with Poetic Justice, our first question has always been, what is the best thing we can do for the women that we serve? And so going there, you know, I really debated even accepting it in the first place. I got an email, and it was in my, I don't know, promotions box, and I thought it was spam, and I almost deleted it. And I was like, what? This is real? And they do this huge background check on you where they talk to all these different people to make sure you're not some kind of loony person. That jury's still out on that, but no. So for me, I just kept coming back to, and I asked them. So when I got nominated, I asked the women that were filmed, you know, would they be okay with this? And they all said, we want our story to be told. They can find us and see our mugshots, but that's not the whole story. So that was at the core of the filming that they did. They really honored the journey and the courage of the women that are incarcerated. So it was a crazy experience.
How about you, Dave? You got to go up there and be the the faithful, loyal husband that, as your wife was honored for this big thing. What was that like for you, watching what she had done all those years?
It was neat.
Recognized like it was.
Got to hang out with a few celebrities and things like that. Got to meet Anderson Cooper. That was fun. He was a really nice guy. I've never been to New York City. Ellen had before because one of her brothers used to live up there. But anybody ever been to New York City before here? An incredible place. Just it's rather large, as you know. You see, of course, it's in so many movies. So many movies have that as the setting. But to be there was amazing, and to meet the different heroes. They're all incredible people, and to be able to chat with them and get their stories, like the guy that won, it's amazing. There's another guy who's a doctor that got tired of seeing young men come in and get shot up in his emergency room, so he decided to be more preemptive and to work with them to get them where they're not in a place where they're getting shot, sort of thing. So I got to meet a lot of people. It's a very worldly event, if I could use that term. So, but to me, I mean that in the sense that obviously it's not a Christian event. It's just the setting and the glamour and all that has that whole thing to it of New York City. And but for the light to be, we all hear so much bad news. I'm grateful that CNN does this because it's nice to hear some good stuff. I mean, you guys in here, you all have your influence and what you're doing, and how many times is your story being told? So it's just nice for the good things that are happening to be shared and not just negative stories.
Yeah. We went to eat last night, and I said, Ellen, why aren't people coming up and asking for your autograph? Surely they must have seen this and known you are a world celebrity now. She goes, no, nobody recognizes me, And she didn't do it obviously for recognition. She was doing it in secret, as the Bible talks about, in a way. And but no matter what we do, wherever we are in our corner of the world, in places where we can have an influence, for the kingdom or whatever, a positive influence, that God honors that. And that maybe the world won't honor it, maybe won't see it on a big scale like what happened with Ellen. But if each one of us who are Christ followers try to make a difference where we are, in our circle, in our family, in our job, in our neighborhood, in whatever, if we each do that, then as God uses each one of us in different ways, and really, really incredible things can happen. And I want to mention a verse that Jesus talked about in Matthew chapter 25, where he talked about, I was in prison. I was hungry and you fed me, and I was naked and you clothed me, and I was in prison and you came and visited me. And not too many people are doing I was in prison and you visited me. And I think what Ellen has done is really remarkable and making a difference in the lives. And some of you here have had family members, male and female, incarcerated. And you know what it's like, some of the things that they've been through, and some of the trials on the family members and so on, children and all that kind of stuff. And it's nice to know that there are at least a few people out there trying to, rather than just gripe about it and judge everybody, try to get out there and make a difference. And so anyway, I think what you did is amazing and incredible, and I'm thankful that somehow somebody recognized what you were doing and made a big deal out of it, because it needs to be made a big deal out of, because it's the very kind of thing that's on the heart of God. And that's why Jesus said, is if you do that to these other people, it's just the same as if you'd done it for me. So,
share one thing. Mother Teresa, one of her famous sayings was, and this hits home to me, is that none of us, she said, none of us can do great things, but we can do things with great love. Or I'm kind of paraphrasing. Did I get that right? I think some of us, for me, I think, well, I can't do, I don't have the influence of, some people just have a natural stage. Say if you're Bob Stoops or you're President Trump, whoever, if you've got a platform, then you've got a natural means to have influence. But here we are, we're just regular folks. We can't, in that sense, do great things. But whoever we encounter, we can encounter them with great love, whether it's a stranger, whether it's someone in prison or whatever, and that's where the change happens.
Anything else you want to add, Ellen, to what you're
One small story. We started a class 2 weeks ago at the Tulsa jail. The Tulsa Sheriff's Department contracted with ICE, the Immigration Control Enforcement, to take busloads of people from the border who were crossing illegally and house them in the Tulsa jail. So that's nearly 1,000 miles away. And so most of those are men, but there's quite a few women. And that just broke my heart to think about women being separated from their children at the border, stuck in a bus, handcuffed, and taken to Tulsa, Oklahoma. So we started that class 2 weeks ago, and it's just been extraordinary. This last week on Thursday, we had 3 women from China who had come here for asylum and instead have been taken to jail in Tulsa, and they have family in the United States. They speak not one word of English. And so no one had spoken to them in their language since they had come. We had women from South America, from India, from Cuba, and most of them were seeking asylum, and most of them instead were handcuffed and brought to Tulsa. So we ended up having a class. We have a volunteer who speaks Chinese, so she was translating into Chinese. We have 2 volunteers who speak Spanish. They were translating into Spanish. And then we had a woman there who was deaf, and one of the incarcerated women is fluent in American Sign Language. So I was doing English, and all this was happening. And honestly, in our classes, even our volunteers who are not believers call it a sacred space. Every time I go, every night I'm there, there comes a moment where it's absolutely quiet and all the women are writing. And seeing it Thursday night happening in 4 different languages, I just thought, these women have probably not had a really positive experience of America, and where did they find, for me, the America that I love, the America that welcomes those who are broken and lost? They found it from other women who are incarcerated in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And that's kind of just a picture of what our classes are like.
Well, when you hear things about women being incarcerated at Oklahoma in a higher rate than anywhere else in the world, this is somebody who's on the forefront out there trying to make a difference. And you guys also, I'm sure, try to influence those who are establishing the laws that put women away for long, long years. Saying even if a woman has a small amount of marijuana in the car and that's endangering a child, which is a violent crime, and they could go away for 20 years simply because of that, of some parts of the law that are just really bizarre. I mean, it just really does. Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense. It just is so disproportional. And so when you hear about that, remember and pray for Ellen and her team of people that started off with a couple. Now you have 35 working in every prison that has women in the state of Oklahoma.
So Mabel Bassett has about 1,400 women. They're at 115% capacity. And so the way it's like, think about a small town full of all women, and word gets out quickly. So we have over 200 women on the waiting list for a class at Mabel Bassett. It's an 8-week class, and then we finished the 8 weeks. The first time we did it, they said, it's not enough. We're just beginning to experience healing. So we did an advanced class of 8 weeks, and they said, we still want to keep writing. So we have 45 women on the outside, anything from moms to professors to counselors to bartenders who are writing to women on the inside. And it's life-changing because they have people come visit them, maybe some of them, but they never feel like normal human beings. And to have a relationship with somebody who's just a normal person, that in itself can change their lives.
Do you have anything you're going to leave as far as literature or your web? Anybody here?
We're on Facebook, Poetic Justice Oklahoma, OKLA, and poeticjustice.org is our website. And we're hoping Our next goal is to get into the Oklahoma City jail. It is a locked box, literally. 13 stories off downtown, and they don't let anybody in. And so, but I won't give up. We're going to get in the Oklahoma City jail.
All right. All right, Dave, why don't you give our closing prayer today? We'll take off.
Father, I thank you for each person here. We thank you for this group, your children. God, we're your sons and daughters. We thank you for this time, sacred time, to be together, to worship you as your body. Pray for each of us that you would encourage us, give us wisdom today to follow you, to take that next step, whatever it is. There's folks here who are really hurting today. There's folks that are we're all in unique places in our journey with you. Help us to find you today and to find you through each other. And thank you, Father, for this new day. It's a day you've made, and we give ourselves to you again. In Jesus' name, amen.
All right. All right, thanks for coming, you guys. We will see you next week.